Hi everyone, and welcome to our lecture on the open ocean. So this lecture is going to have a lot of kind of repetitive information. Some of it we learned way back in the early in the semester when it comes to like zooplankton, some phytoplanktons and stuff like that. Another part of it is going to be partly stuff that we talked about when we talked about the subtidal zone. So remember the little picture that I drew you guys with the continental shelf, the continental slope, the abyssal plain, all that kind of stuff. We're going to be talking about the same similar kind of ecosystem, so we're going to be overlapping a little bit already. So if I go a little bit fast, that's why, but remember you have these videos recorded so you can always go back and rewatch it if you need to. So let's go ahead and get started with the open ocean. Now, to remind you that the open ocean is, again, the open ocean. So it's basically anywhere from the surface of the water almost all the way down. Because we're going to be talking about the abyssal plain next week. We're going to be talking about the deep sea next week. But when we're talking about the open ocean, we're talking about the water column. Okay, so there's no land, there's no bottom. It's just open ocean. Okay, so majority of this open ocean life is going to be found in the first 200 meters. This is known as the epipelagic. Remember, the epi means on top and pelagic means the open ocean. Okay, so the epipelagic zone is where most of the life is going to be found, and that's because that's where the light is. Again, everything in the little trophic structure, in the little trophic pyramid, is going to be based around the bottom of the food chain. The bottom of the food chain is primary producers. So you're talking about your algae, you're talking about your phytoplankton, you're talking about photosynthetic bacteria. Anything that needs light is the base of the food chain. So this is why in the first 200 meters, in that epipelagic zone, that's where you're going to get the bulk of this life, at least the bulk of the biodiversity. Remember that the word pelagic just means open ocean. Epipelagic means on top. When you're in the epipelagic, you could either be a neritic species, meaning found over the continental shelf, or you can be an oceanic species, found not over the continental shelf in the open ocean. Because remember, over the continental shelf, it can be up to 200 meters deep. But again, in the water column, not associated with the benthos or the bottom, just in the water column, that's going to be a pelagic organism or one of these open ocean organisms that we're going to be talking about. Now remember the epi again, epipelagic means up on the top layer. So this is going to be the layer that has all the light. And because it has all the light, it's also going to have all the heat, right? So that sunlight is only going to heat that top 200 meters of water. You go below 200 meters of water, it is cold. It is very cold, it is very dark, and no, you're not going to get that fluctuations seasonally. Like in the summer, you're going to get really warm epipelagic waters. In the wintertime, you're going to get a little bit colder, but below that, you're never going to get any change, right? Our waters are very, very uniform. And again, below that, you're not going to get a lot of mixing, and therefore you're not going to get a lot of temperature variation. The temperature is going to be very consistent below that 200 meters. Even though there is no bottom, we still have a lot of primary productivity. Okay, so most people are like, oh, there's no algae way out in the ocean. So there are. They're floating algae. They're planktonic algae. So this would be like your phytoplankton. A lot of these guys are still doing photosynthesis. And even though they're really small, doing a tiny little bit of photosynthesis, there's so many of them over such a broad, vast expanse of water that, yeah, together, collectively, they do still make up a big bulk of that primary productivity. Now, some of the disadvantages to living in the epipelagic are there's no bottom. There's no bottom. So if you are one of those little organisms, especially maybe one without a brain and maybe good swimming skills, you do not want to sink to the bottom. If you're photosynthetic and you sink below those 200 meters, you're not going to be able to get the sunlight that you need, and therefore you're not going to be able to photosynthesize. You're not going to be able to feed yourself. Eventually you're going to starve to death in the deep, deep, dark, cold abyss. So there is no bottom. So there's no settling. There's no sitting on the bottom. There's no resting on the bottom. Anything you have to do, you're doing in that water column. What else? There's no deposit feeding, right? There's no bottom to deposit feed off of. Remember, deposit feeders are going along the bottom and they're eating sediments off of the bottom. They're keeping those organic nutrients and they're getting rid of the non-organic nutrients. So if if you're a deposit feeder, you're not going to live mid-water column. There's no deposit. There's nothing for you to actually feed off of. There's also no place to hide. Remember, everything loves rugosity, everything loves complexity and structure because there's so many little nooks and crannies you can hide in. No nooks and crannies in the open ocean. It's just completely open and wide, and therefore you kind of do stand out. You are a little bit more vulnerable. So there's no actual places to hide. So A lot of these organisms will actually hide in plain sight, right? Those are the organisms that are going to be like translucent, transparent, like the jellies that we learned about. You can basically see right through them. And therefore, if you're scanning the waters and you're like, no, don't really see anything here, right? Those jellies can actually blend in. Counter shading is another really good one. Dark from above, if you're looking down, you blend into the darkness of the bottom. Light from below, which means if you look up, you blend into the light from the surface. So either way, you're camouflaged no matter what direction you're actually looking at. So, if you are a plankton does great. Remember, planktos means to wander, to float. So these guys are your floaters. If you're plankton, you're probably going to be doing great in these areas. So they're thriving in the epipelagic because there's not a lot of organisms there who are going to eat you. Remember, this is way out in the ocean. Majority of life is found over the continental shelf. So as soon as you go away from that continental shelf, now you're in the open ocean, right? You're not going to have all the organisms that you would over the continental shelf. So remember that anything plankton is just at the mercy of the currents. They cannot swim very well. Maybe you can swim up or down just a little bit, but if the whole current is moving this way, you're moving with the mercy of the current is what it's called. Remember, plankton does not mean microscopic, right? We have some 8-foot jellies that are planktonic, right? They're not microscopic. Majority of the things we think about that are planktonic are microscopic, but not all of them. Plankton just means to wander, or to float at the mercy of the currents. So remember, they're not all small. And that's something that we learned way back in the early semester, so don't forget that. Usually they're classified by size, some of the structures that they have, or how long they actually spend in the plankton. Remember that there are meroplanktonic and holoplanktonic organisms. Not all of them spend their entire time in the plankton. So here's a little plankton strew. Hopefully you guys remember this. Remember, you have your practical coming up. And yes, we are going back to things like diatoms and dinoflagellates. Things we haven't learned about in a really long time. So this guy right here, right, with his little eye spot and his little 2 antennae coming off here. This guy is a copepod, right? That little balinus copepod right here. You've definitely got some diatoms right here. This little circular one right here. This little geometric shape guy right there, those are both diatoms, different types of diatoms. Diatom as well. Diatom, diatom, diatom. Another copepod here, another copepod here. Lots of copepods. I don't see any dinoflagellates that I can see of. So pretty much everything in this picture is either going to be a copepod or it's going to be a diatom. So make sure if I put this out there, I could ask you, any one of these, what is it? And you should be able to, at least you should be able to tell. Now, remember holoplanktonic and meroplanktonic? Holoplanktonic means you're always in the plankton, right? You spend your entire life in the plankton. Those copepods, the diatoms, arrowworms, jellies, right? They spend their entire time in the plankton, right? Meroplanktonic means you only spend part of the time in the plankton. So like larval fishes, larval crabs, pretty much anything larval is probably going to spend part of its time and only part of its time in the plankton. Then as it grows and develops, it will actually move out of the plankton and then settle to wherever it's going to be. Barnacles, sea stars, fishes, lots of things are meroplanktonic. Okay, so remember, part of the time in the plankton, the rest of their life not in the plankton. Phytoplankton, again, are floating plants. Phyto meaning plants. These are your plants, your algae. Anything that's going to be doing photosynthesis is going to be your phytoplankton. Different from your zooplankton. Zoo means animal, so this is your floating animals, like your copepods and your arrowworms and stuff like that. Diatoms, okay, remember diatoms are going to be those geometric shapes, right? We have a circle, we have the pennate. Sometimes they're stacked on top of each other. Sometimes they look like little petri dishes, just stacked right on top of each other, just like that. Again, small, some kind of geometric shape, very simple are our diatoms. They're very, very important primary producers because there's a ton of them out there. There's literally a ton of diatoms out there. So collectively, as they do a little bit of photosynthesis, they produce a little bit of oxygen, right? But together as a whole, they produce a lot of our Earth's atmosphere is actually collected via these diatoms. They can be they can be singular or colonial. So you can get the individual single ones, like the little centric ones that we saw, the little pennate ones that we saw. Or you can get them colonial, meaning they stack up on each other and they form these long colonies, all working together as an individual, even though they are smaller individuals making up that larger individual. Remember, pennate is that pen-shaped one. Centric is the round-shaped one. Those are just two forms of diatoms. There are lots more, but those are two forms that I might specifically ask you, what is the name of this shape? You can't say circular. You can say centric. So make sure that you make that distinction for your upcoming practical. So again, these are just typical diatoms right here. So you can see the centric one right here. This would be the pennate shaped right here, or again, right here. Remember, but we see some of these triangular shapes right here. No, I'm not going to ask you guys what these are, but I could either put this picture up on your practical and say, what are these? And you could say diatoms, or I could say specifically, what is the shape of this one right here? And you would have to say pennate. So make sure that you're keeping that in mind as you guys study for your final practical. Dinoflagellates, remember these are the Eiffel Tower looking guys, or the Death Star, right? And dinoflagellate means two flagella. Okay, so they do have two flagella. If you are the Death Star, you have one flagella going around your waistband, kind of like a belt, and the other one kind of coming off here. So this controls the up and down motions, this controls the forward back motions. So yes, they can swim, but they are still considered planktonic because they are still the mercy of the current. Even if they can go up and down and left or right a little bit, as a whole, they're still floating with that current. Some of these guys, remember, these are the ones that can be bioluminescent. So if you're walking on the beach, in fact, there was just a video of this on Facebook. Some guy down in Santa Monica, which wasn't even supposed to be there, was caught like crashing waves, and it was full of these dinoflagellates, so they were glowing blue. That's that bioluminescence, that really beautiful color that we've talked about, always coming from these dinoflagellates. Now, bioluminescence is really cool and really awesome, but things like red tides and these algae, these dinoflagellate blooms are not so good. So these guys can actually contain little bits of toxin, just little bits of toxin, but when their numbers are in really high abundance, now all of that, those little bits of toxins have accumulated into this like big concentration of toxins. This is what causes those red tides. This is what causes all those fish kills. So red tides and some of these blooms are not necessarily good things. And we can see again, typically right here, this very classic looking Eiffel Tower shape for this dinoflagellate. Cyanobacteria, remember cyano means blue-green, so these are your blue-green photosynthetic bacteria. Okay, usually found in these long chains like this right here. In fact, this is Oscillatoria. Oh, you can always tell Oscillatoria, actually, I think this is Anabaena. Oscillatoria kind of looks like little petri dishes stacked on top of each other to make these long chains, almost looks like long hair-like things. We did see this in the lab. It might be on your practical. You can always look up, what did I just say? There's Anabaena, and with the small like chains of pearls. And then there's, oh, I'm blanking right here. Oscillatoria, there it is, Oscillatoria. And again, that's going to be the stacks of the little green ones. Very easy to identify, but both of them are blue-green algae. Long chains of individual bacteria that actually form these longer structures, working together again to do photosynthesis. So important primary producers. These are all part of those phytoplankton that are found floating around, and very common and really easy to identify. These guys also fix nitrogen. So again, they're doing this photosynthesis. So they're taking this atmospheric, and in this case, dissolved nitrogen into the water that we can't use. We need nitrogen to survive, but we can't just grab it out of the air and use it. So what they do is they actually use it through a process that benefits them, but then they store the nitrogen inside of them, so then when we eat them, we can actually get those usable bits of nitrogen that we now need that we are not able to absorb from the environment like they can. Coccolithophores, remember that this is the ball of pineapple slices. Okay, so you just took a bunch of pineapple slices and you stuck them into a ball. These are coccolithophores. Coccolithophores are very tiny, very tiny. So imagine if a quarter was the size of a diatom, like take a pen and just make a dot. That would be the size of a coccolithophore. They're very, very tiny. They are usually found in actually both waters, so they can be found over the continental shelf. They can also be found over the open ocean. Those ball of pineapple slices are actually made out of calcium carbonate, and so their shells are actually a big source of the bottom of the ocean. So as they die, their shells fall to the ground, they fall to the bottom, and that's a big source of usable bits of nutrients that some of those like detritivores can eat. Remember those guys who are eating all the sediments? they can pick up those usable bits of nutrients, but they're also creating like the 3D bottom, like the sand itself almost. These guys do not like nutrients, right? So they are not the ones who like love the nutrients, like the algae and stuff. Love it when all those like, when the river runoff is giving them all those nutrients and the minerals that are coming from land. These guys don't like that. So they would never be found near, say, like an estuary. They'd be found in clean, crystal clear, like away from shore kind of waters. And they don't like light. So these guys are not doing the photosynthesis in the big, bright, shiny day, like we would see like some of the diatoms or some of the cyanobacteria. These guys don't need as much light to do the photosynthesis. They're also extremely small. So literally less light for them is actually going to be better. Silica flageolets. This is the star-shaped one. Yes, they do have flagella. Okay, so that's flageolets right here. So these are the silicoflagellates, meaning yes, that they do have flagella. Two flagella, just like the dinoflagellates, so that's how they are similar to the dinoflagellates. They do have this star-shaped structure right here, again made of silica, hence silica flagellates, not the calcium carbonate that we just saw when it comes to the coccolithophores, but the actual silica is actually making their little tests and their little shells right here. These guys are the opposite of coccolithophores. They love nutrients. They love areas of upwelling. Stir that up, these guys love it. They do like warm, clear water, so you can find them in equatorial waters. You can also find them in high latitude. So they don't only like it near the equator, they both like high altitude. So they're kind of like the extremes. They like the poles, they like the tropics, they don't like anything else in between. Like the coccolithophores do. They're usually more in the temperate waters, whereas these guys are found in the extremes and then the equators. So yeah, silica flagellates. Zooplanktons, again, copepods are one of the most numerous organisms in the ocean. They make up a huge amount of biomass. So between krill and copepods, both arthropods, they're kind of like the most abundant organism in the ocean. So really easy to recognize. Two big distinct antennae coming out, segmented body. This is it from up top. This is it from the side. Definitely make sure that you guys can actually identify these copepods, because this one will for sure. If it makes up a huge amount of the biomass. In fact, 70% of all zooplankton on the planet are made up of copepods. Like I said, if you were to get like a gallon of water, you would probably have hundreds of copepods swimming around in that just 1 gallon of water. So you can imagine how many there are. There's a ton. They do eat phytoplankton, so they're mostly found in the epipelagic. However, they are part of what's called the vertical migrators, and we're going to talk about that. But there are some organisms that like to hang out in the daytime where it's deep and dark and cold, because they don't want to be spotted by predators either. And then at night, they'll actually come up to that epipelagic zone where there is things like phytoplankton to feed. So they will only feed at night. They'll come up, they'll feed on all that phytoplankton in the safety of the darkness of the night. And then come morning, they actually go back down to the safety of the darker waters below the epipelagic. So these are known as vertical migrators. They will vertically migrate up in the water column at night to feed, and then they will go back down in the water column during the daytime to hide out from their predators. So important vertical migrators, these little copepods right here. And they're a huge food source for lots of different organisms. Arrowworms eat these guys. Jellies eat these guys. Whales eat these guys. I mean, they're a big food source. And it's great because they're so abundant. So very important and crucial to keep these copepods in our oceans. We already talked about arrowworms. Remember, these are the Ketonatha, the bristle mouth worms, right? Those ones with little mouths like this. Voracious little predators. They're going around killing everything that they can. Anybody who's smaller than them, they're going to try to eat you. For sure. So they're long, they're skinny. Remember, they have that cuticle around them. They have those little fins to swim with. Jellies, regular like true jellies, and cone jellies, like the ctenophores that we talked about. Very abundant in the pelagic zone, in the open ocean. So even though they're not like those big jellies that we talked about, remember that 6-foot jelly? Not a small organism, but still, even though he can go up and down, he's still at the mercy of the current. If the current's floating this way, even that 6-foot jelly can't fight against the current, which is why they're considered planktonic. Even though they're not small, they are still at the mercy of the currents and therefore floaters, like plankton, floaters. Remember, nectonic means over the continental shelf. So anything oceanic would be off the continental shelf. Anything nectonic, sorry, that would be neritic. Vocab words, neritic. If you are nectonic is a little bit different. Nectonic means you can swim. Okay, so if you are nectonic, you live in the water column, but you can swim. So like a tuna, right? Open ocean, billfish, sailfish, all that kind of stuff, whales, orcas, sharks, anything like that would be considered nectonic. They live in the open ocean, but they can actually swim against the current. That tuna, that shark can fight against the current. So they're not planktonic, they are nectonic. Different than neritic. I know, even I get these mixed up sometimes. Okay, so again, fish, mammals, reptiles, any swimming reptiles like crocodiles and snakes and stuff, those will all be considered nectonic because they can swim and fight against the current. Now, if you are going to be fighting against the current, you have to worry about things like increased drag. So drag is the stickiness of water. Remember, we learned that water is sticky, right? Gives it all those amazing properties, but it also sticks to you. So as you're swimming against it, it's essentially like you're swimming in molasses. You're like, oh my God, this is really thick. I can't get through you. That's drag. Okay, so what swimmers do, like even human swimmers do, they'll like shave their legs, right? They'll shave their chest hair. They'll shave all their hair on their body because that hair is going to, any more surface area that you have, even if it's just a little hair, it's going to grab those water molecules, making it harder for you to get through. So what you want to do is you always want to decrease your drag. And sometimes that either means increasing or decreasing your surface area. Now, if you're not a swimmer, say you're one of those plankton and you don't want to sink, then you want to increase your surface area. So if you're a swimmer, you want to decrease your surface area. You want to be streamlined. If you are a floater, you want to increase your surface area. So that's why some of those larval organisms that we looked at have those big long spines coming out of all these different directions. That's increasing the surface area. So now they can sit and float on top of the water. So now they're sitting on those water molecules and they're like, cool, I'm floating on the water. Even though they're in the water, they're still floating on those water molecules and they're not sinking down to the bottom. Very important if you're a planktonic organism who does things like photosynthesis, or your food source does photosynthesis. So again, you don't want to go too far away from your food source. So if you sink too far down, you're not going to be able to eat. So decreasing drag if you're a swimmer is a good thing. Increasing surface area if you're a floater is also a good thing. Okay, so if you are, again, being flat, again, that's increasing your surface area so you can sit on those water molecules. Spines, other like extra appendages, legs and stuff like that, increasing surface area allows you to sit on those water molecules. So that would be some things like the plankton or the floaters who want to sit on top of the water molecules, not sink. Right. So in this case, if you are a planktonic, you want to increase your drag, right? You want the water sticking to you so you don't sink. If you're a swimmer, you don't. You want to reduce the drag and therefore reduce your surface area. So it depends on what your, how you live your life. Are you a swimmer? Decrease drag, decrease surface area. Are you a floater? Increase drag, increase surface area. And then that'll be more beneficial to, again, what you're trying to get out of it. Increasing buoyancy is another one. Say you're one of those floaters, right? You're one of those plankton. You need to stay up above the, dark depths of the abyss. So in this case, if you're not going to have a bunch of spines and appendages poking out of you, maybe you have something that also helps you float, like oil. Okay, so developing meroplanktonic organisms that only spend part of their time in the plankton, sometimes in their little egg, have a droplet of oil. And one, oil has a lot of nutrients in it. So oil has, it's full of calories. So as you're developing, you have a food source. Great. Number two, oil and water don't mix. Oil floats. Okay, so if you have a little tiny drop of oil in your egg, that's going to keep the egg up. You sink too far down, you've now gone 5,000 feet down, you're dead. Right? You're not going to be, if you're a little reef fish, you're not going to survive 5,000 feet down. So you need to stay up in the water column. So a lot of these eggs and stuff will have little bits of oil droplets inside of them that help them stay afloat. Now that developing fish or whatever we're talking about is going to eat off that oil droplet to get energy. And presumably, once you're large enough to swim on your own, that oil is completely gone, but you're large enough to swim now. So you won't sink to the bottom. Even if you're just a little darter and you can only swim a little bit, you're still not going to sink all the way down. Sometimes if you don't have oil, you can actually trap air. So there's a species of pelagic snail. Yeah, think snail, like crawling on the bottom snail, right? But they have a pelagic snail who actually releases air bubbles. So he actually releases air bubbles and creates what's called a bubble net. So that he's actually like floating underneath this little series of bubbles in this little mucus thing. So he actually creates his own little kind of parachute raft to float around in the open ocean. So you think, yeah, there's not going to be any snails. Snails are always benthic. They're not. There are pelagic snails and even pelagic nudibranchs. You know those little sea slugs that we talked about, the little colorful ones? Pelagic nudibranchs, it's called a sea dragon. It's really cool, actually. I wonder if I have a picture. So let's talk about spines, right? So you can see right here these elongated spines here, elongated spines. Okay, all of these guys, like this is a crab, this is a shrimp, this is a barnacle, this is another different type of crab. All of these guys right here have all of these little appendages and these spines poking out. And that's going to allow them to sit on those water molecules. The water molecules are sticking to each other. So if you put just a little bit of pressure, you're not going to break those hydrogen bonds. You're going to actually be able to sit on top of those hydrogen bonds like a water strider bug, or how the spiders can sometimes walk across water, all creepy like. Same kind of thing here. Even though they're in the water, they're still sitting on top of water molecules and therefore kind of hanging out in the net that's created, not sinking down to the bottom, which is really cool. And then this guy right here, this is a developing egg for a little fish, and you can see a big old oil globule right there. And that's, again, that even that tiny little bit of oil is going to help them stay afloat. It's going to help them with their buoyancy. Now, there are more types of floaters than just plankton. Okay, so there's Neustonic and Plustonic. So if you are a member Nectonic, you can swim against the current. These guys cannot swim against the current. These are still the floaters. But if you are Neustonic, you are floating just beneath the surface. So if this is my surface, I'm floating right here. Okay, so this is air. This is water. I'm floating just below the surface. Now, a lot of organisms actually use this Neuston property kind of as a way of protecting themselves. Imagine if you're in the open ocean, there's 360 degrees that a predator can come at you. If you have backed yourself up to the air and are just looking downwards, now there's only 180 degrees that you have to worry about. Nobody's going to come attack you from up here. It's the air. There's nobody there. Okay, but down here, now you can kind of put your back against something and look out and be like, all right, I can see my predators. Now, mind you, small fishes do this sometimes. They will actually, larval fishes will hang out right here on the surface level. Now, I told you nothing's going to come get you. That's not exactly true, because what do we have that still eats things in the ocean? Birds, right? So if you're floating just above the water right here, the water-air surface line, yes, you're protected because you can kind of put your back against the air and look downwards and say, okay, I can see if a predator's coming to get me. But what you can't see is if a predator is coming down here and goes, whoop, swoops you up and picks you up. So that's how some of these fish, or some of these birds can fly along looking at the surface of the water, fly by, grab something, and never even hit the water. They just grab it right out of the water because it's Neustonic. They're hanging out right here, right at the air-water surface interval. Plustonic is slightly different. So now remember, we have Nectonic, you can swim. Plankton means you can float. Neustonic means you're floating just below the surface level. And Plustonic means half of you is above the surface, half of you is below. And that's what we can see right here, this little Portuguese man-of-war. Right? He has his gas-filled bladder up top. That's his modified bell. But his tentacles are hanging down below the water. This guy is a classic example of Plustonic. Some parts are above the water, some parts are below the water. So think, again, Portuguese man-of-war when you think of an example of Plustonic. Remember, again, there's no real place for you to hide in the open ocean. So one, you're going to have to be really camouflaged, meaning you're transparent. If you live deep enough, you can be black or red, because, again, red disappears, so automatically you turn black as soon as you go below a certain feet. I think it's like 50 feet. Everything becomes black. So you can kind of blend into the bottom. Or you got to be fast. You got to be fast, you got to be highly maneuverable. So if you are going to be completely out in the open, you got to be fast. So think flying fish. Flying fish are a classic example of Neustonic animals who don't float, they're not floating around there, but they are swimming basically right here at the air-water surface interval right there. And that's because they're looking out for things like tuna. Tuna, swordfish, billfish, those are all really, really fast swimmers. And so are flying fish. So flying fish have to be even faster than them. And when they're not faster than them, because they're not faster than a tuna, what they have to do is they have to leap out of the water. So that's kind of their defensive mechanism. I'm going to swim as fast as I can away from you. Right? Because I'm looking down, oh, there's a predator coming. Go, 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 go. So you rush, you rush, you rush. Hopefully you can outrun them. If you can't, that's when the flying fish will actually break the surface of the water. And with his modified pectoral fins, he will stick them out and he will actually glide. Now, he can't fly, he can't flap, but he can glide, and he will glide for long periods of time. And hopefully by the time he hits the water, whoever was chasing him has lost him now. So imagine you're in the water and all of a sudden, boom, he jumps out and you're like, crap, I don't know where he's going to come down. He can come down anywhere. So that's what they're doing. They're trying to stay out of the water as long as they can. So when they land back in the water, the predator who's chasing him has lost him. Now, potentially, could that tuna look up and be like, yeah, I still see you? Yes, he could. And sometimes that happens. That's why they still get to eat flying fish. So you gotta be fast. Like the tuna as well. Great white sharks chase down tuna. Great white sharks are pretty fast. Tuna are pretty fast, and yet they still eat them. So you gotta be really fast, or you gotta be colored appropriately. Remember, counter shading, really amazing thing. Again, great white sharks, counter shading. White on their belly, so if you were below them looking up, they would blend into the white coming from the sun. Darker on the top, so if you were to look down, you look down on them, they're dark on the top, they're dark on the bottom. They blend into the darkness of looking down into the ocean. So that's kind of allowing them to blend in no matter which direction you're looking at them from. The other types of color, protective coloration, again, transparent, black, red, all of those things blend in really, really quickly to the surrounding ocean. So then you're like, oh, you've completely disappeared, even though you're really right there. Migrations. Some organisms will migrate, right? Those vertical migrators that we talked about, they will migrate vertically, they'll migrate seasonally, they'll migrate distances. You know, some will migrate to avoid predators, some will migrate to find prey. But all of these kind of things are used to help, one, avoid being eaten, and two, actually find food in this vast emptiness that is the open ocean. Because it's empty. It's empty. I've dove it, it's empty. Remember that story I told you guys about when I was floating around and I saw a little jelly? And I was like, I feel weird. I feel weird. And I just hung out with the jelly. He's like this big. They'd eat me before they'd eat the jelly. I don't know who they are, but again, you just kind of feel very vulnerable when you're in the open ocean because there's just nothing. Sense organs. Sense organs are very, very important if you are, say, trying to find food in a big empty desert, like our whales. Remember our toothed whales that have the big melon that do the echolocation? This is an amazing sense organ that allows them to find food from great distances. If you were just searching and searching and searching and searching, you might search forever and never find anything. But if you can kind of like ping something and be like, aha, I know for sure there's food there, now you've increased the chances that you're actually going to get food and therefore be able to survive. So senses are very important. Eyesight. Eyesight is a very important one. You need to be able to see if a predator is coming, right? So having good eyes, especially in the open ocean, because typically in the open ocean, it's the clearest of all the waters. Okay, so there's not a lot of, first of all, there's no sediments being stirred up from the land because we're nowhere near land. There's no wave action because we're nowhere near land. Again, waves are only going to be found near land. Most of the time in the open ocean, it's actually pretty flat. Now, there are storms and there's winds and there's giant waves that could happen too. But most of the time, it's actually pretty calm and pretty clear out in the open ocean, most of the time. We didn't get a chance to talk about rogue waves. Rogue waves are pretty cool, but they do happen in the open ocean. More common in the Atlantic than in the Pacific. And a phenomenon that's just been happening for years and believed to be the cause for a lot of shipwrecks. So if a ship just didn't show up, then you'd be like, okay, well, the captain must have got drunk and he ran into something, right? And that's kind of what they did. They blamed captains for a lot of the times, and it wasn't necessarily always their fault. At least we're now starting to believe that it's not necessarily their fault. Because we have documented waves up to, oh my God, I think the biggest one was like a 100-foot wave, like a 100-foot rogue wave. So what happens is the waves travel in, they travel in waves like this, okay? Well, sometimes some of these waves in the cross will kind of join together. So 2 or 3 waves will join together, and that energy that they had now surges, and it's basically like a wall of water. And this scares me, and I'm not scared of the ocean. This scares me. I told you, you're way more likely to die from the water in the ocean than any animal. Period. Any animal. You're probably going to die from the water. If you're going to die from the ocean, than an animal. So don't be afraid of sharks. Be afraid of the water. So what essentially it is, normal waves are little, and then all of a sudden you just have this massive wall. It's called a rogue wave. There's just one of them, and it's just this wall of water. They documented it on, I think it was The Deadliest Catch. It's a rough seas, and these guys are used to being out on rough seas. They're used to all this kind of stuff. And they're getting hit by 20-foot seas. Those are really big. And then all of a sudden, he's 100 foot up, and here's a wave that's like eye level and just smashes into the boat. It's crazy the kind of damage that these rogue waves can do. I digressed. We're talking about eyes, but rogue waves are super cool. And they're just natural phenomenon, and they're totally unpredictable. Totally unpredictable. All of a sudden, and they even make movies on this. I think it was called Poseidon. I never actually saw it. But it was like a cruise ship gets hit by a rogue wave and just knocks the whole cruise ship over. It could happen. Guys, rare. Very, very rare. And like I said, more common in the northern Atlantic than here in the Pacific. Here in the Pacific, you're pretty much okay. They're crazy. Google them if you want to look at it. Really cool. All right, so you got to have eyes if you're going to be living in the open ocean. And if you don't, you're probably going to get eaten. So the most successful guys here, especially the larger organisms, all have really, really well-developed eyes. Say you're a schooling organism, right? You have a lateral line. Remember, the lateral line is those little jelly-filled cups that vibrate and kind of allow you to sense who's next to you, see how far away your neighbor is to you. This is really important because you guys can actually move as a group in this uniformed, timed manner, even though nobody's actually communicating, go left here. Everyone just senses we have to go left. This helps you to avoid prey. This can also help you to find food because you're traveling in a big group. So everyone's kind of looking out for food sources. So lateral lines are really super helpful for determining not only who's around you, but helping you avoid being eaten. So if you look at those bait balls, like huge groups of smaller fishes, they're all moving in this uniform pattern. They're dodging these prey, and it's actually really successful. Of course, they're not quite as smart as some of these other mammals, and so the mammals will usually team up and then create that bait ball, because when you're big and spread out, it's really hard to get a hold of you. If you condense them into a tight ball, then all you have to do is take turns darting through the ball with your mouth open, and essentially you will grab someone, because anybody on the inside can't see what's going on the outside. So the ones on the outside are like, crap, there's a fish there, or there's a whale there, let's move this way. But on the inside, they're like, I don't know, I'm just sensing everybody with my lateral line. I'm going left because we're all supposed to go left, and then boom, you get hit by a dolphin or something. Crazy. We already talked about dolphins and the toothed whales. Remember, especially if you're a sperm whale, right, they're eating those giant squid, the world's deepest divers, so they're diving all the way down to the bottom to get that squid, to get that food source. Imagine diving 3,000 feet, holding your breath, wasting all that energy, and you'd come up with empty-handed. You could probably only do that a handful of times before you straight up run out of energy and then starve to death. So what they do is they'll ping them from the top, they'll take a big breath, and they'll be like, I know where my food is, and then they'll beeline straight to that food so they're not wasting their energy, right? You don't want to waste your energy trying to find food and not be successful. It's one thing if you would put in an investment in and say, I'm going to go down and I'm going to catch that squid. Great. If you get it, boom, all that energy you just wasted isn't for a waste because you got the food. If you keep going down over and over and over again and you never come up with anything, you're not going to be able to survive. So bad things. We already talked about some protective coloration, right? Counter shading is one of them. Camouflage is another. Transparency is great in the open ocean. There are some camouflage organisms that are not transparent and do not have counter shading. Usually these ones are found floating with some kind of algae. So like the Sargasso Sea that we talked about, remember that big floating island of Sargasso? That's in the pelagic. That's not a benthic area, but it is a substrate. So some of these organisms are going to be, again, camouflaged to that. I did include some other organisms that are not included in the open ocean, but because we haven't had a chance to talk about them yet, I just want to show you guys these videos. So that's why they're not all completely open ocean species, but camouflage is always important if you don't want to be eaten. Remember again, counter shading, we already talked about this, so I'm just going to blow through this. Darker above, lighter below. That allows you to blend in no matter which direction you're looking at. Examples of counter shading right here. As you can see right here, this is a penguin with a white belly. As you look at it from the bottom, it kind of appears lighter, just like the air, right? Because you have the sunlight coming down. Same thing with the tuna, this big white belly right here. The whales, and you're thinking it's a humpback whale. Why would you need to be counter shaded? Well, because when they're calves, their calves do get eaten by things like sharks and orcas. So their calves and then they need to be protected. So what they'll usually do is they'll just dive down deep and kind of swim where it's so deep that if you're looking for food, you're not going to be able to find them. Great white sharks too. Again, usually probably not avoiding prey with their white bellies, but the dark tops are, again, if you're looking down, you're not going to be able to see that shark until he all of a sudden breaches and then grabs you and then eats you. So counter shading really, really useful in this open ocean areas. Camouflage, again, we talked about the Sargasso Sea. So there are fishes that look just like Sargassum because they live in the Sargasso Sea. So despite the fact that we are in the middle of the ocean, there's no real land, this floating Sargassum actually does really well out there, and therefore organisms that look like the Sargassum would also do really well in the Sargasso Sea. So Historio right here is, I actually don't even have a picture of him. Well, that is an example of a guy who does look like the Sargassum. But here we have some very classic examples of camouflage as well. So this is our flatfish. This is a little flounder right here. This is a lionfish, if you can even see it. Kind of blends into the coral reef right here. This guy kind of looks like algae, not quite like Sargassum, but does look like algae. Would have to blend in with those little blades. These are two species of frogfish which look like sponges, right? They have all these big holes and pores and stuff. They could clearly resemble a sponge or a stony coral or something like that, and therefore they're walking around trying to find their food without actually being seen. And that's one thing that I'm going to show you guys about. Yes, no, it's not really a pelagic organism, but it is really cool, so we're going to watch a quick video on the frogfish right now.
Story begins with a small fish named Jimmy. Jimmy is about to embark on a remarkable journey in the coral reef. Oh, shit. We have a problem. Jimmy's dead. The 50 or so species of frogfishes are members of the anglerfish family Antenneridae. They are short, stocky, and scaleless, and often look like little pieces of garbage. Frogfishes are masters of disguise. Can we get the flatworm off him? He thinks it's a piece of rotting fish. Frogfishes are He's smiling. It's like a glass picture. They are masters of disguise. A reddish frogfish blends in perfectly with the surrounding... Oh, no, the green thing in front just took a step. My bad. Each species has a camouflaging niche. This one, for example, has evolved to hide in a reef of grumpy old men. With all this hiding, things can get confusing, especially when two expert hiders meet. Here a frog... Oh, shit. Oh my god! Most frogfish are ambush predators whose mouths can open up to 12 times their resting size. Here the frogfish lies in wait, ready for unsuspecting prey to approach the seemingly harmless coral. Unseen, he will strike in the blink of an eye. Frogfish are equipped with many evolutionary modifications. In many varieties, the first dorsal fin spine has evolved into a fishing pole of sorts, tipped with a fancy man's mustachio that can be used as deadly bait. Most frogfish do not have swim bladders. These small gas-filled sacs give other fish buoyancy and help them swim. Therefore, the frogfish has modified pectoral fins which help it to walk on the ocean floor. Sort of. The Sargassum frogfish, however, does have a swim bladder. Its hidey home is near the surface in Sargassum, large clumps of brown floaty seaweed. Its adapted fins look like tiny little fingers, enabling it to climb through the seaweed for Oh shit. They also eat each other, apparently. It's kind of a crappy life if you think about it. It's like if lions look like couches or something. Boo! You're pretty good at hiding. Wait, are you alive? Boo! Just checking. Once I dated a rock for like a week. Dad, you're drunk. No, you can't drive. You can barely stand up. You look like a garbage bag that is also drunk. Okay. All right. Mom's gonna be so pissed. I bet she eats you.
Okay guys, I hope you really liked that video. You know I love those videos so much. So even though it doesn't really have much to do with our open ocean lecture, it is some really great examples of camouflage. So I just had to show that to you guys right now. Some coloration. Remember coloration, if you live in below those first 200 meters, red is a great color to be because red disappears really, really quickly. So if you are red, even though you are bright red, if there were no lights directly on you, you would appear completely black. And if you lived in the black of the abyss, red, and that's something that we're going to learn about next lecture, red is a great color to be. Great color to be is to be red. Because then you just completely blend into the black. So being black or being red or being transparent in this deeper ocean, open ocean areas is usually a pretty good thing. So this is this is a little mysid right here. This is a Dumbo octopus. We have some kind of jelly right here and some crazy spiny little crab right there. It almost looks like a king crab at all. Transparency again, great if you are transparent. Because it's such a big open ocean area, unless you're really close to you, you really wouldn't be able to see it at all. So the light would basically go straight through you. As it gets darker, you completely disappear. If low light, deeper, you would just basically completely disappear if you were transparent or translucent. So great thing, and a lot of the thing that the Cnidarians have adopted when it comes to this. The jellies, the ctenophores are all basically transparent. Arrowworms are kind of whitish, but a little bit transparent, especially their cuticle around them. Copepods, same kind of thing, totally transparent, maybe a little bit white. So really, really useful to be transparent in the open ocean. And that's what we can see right here. So this is a little squid, and here practically transparent. This is a larval flatfish. So this is actually a flatfish during its developmental stage. It remains transparent, so it hides in plain sight before eventually will settle down to the bottom. This is a salp right here. This is one of those chordates that we talked about, like the tunicates and the salps, right? This is a translucent salp. This actually, I forget the name of his, but we have these off of our coast, right? Actually pretty common. So you can try and find these things in trawl nets and stuff. Swimming, remember that if you are not transparent or you can't hide very well, you want to be fast. You gotta be a fast swimmer if you don't want to be eaten. So you pretty much have to have this very streamlined body. You want to reduce drag as much as you possibly can because you want to be able to cut through the water. Not to mention, if you're pelagic, you're always in the open ocean. You're always swimming. There is no, I'm just going to rest here. There's no resting. Okay, so you technically have to sleep while you swim. And you have to swim all the time. So you're wasting a lot of energy. If you're not buoyant, meaning neutrally buoyant, meaning you're not sinking, you're not floating, you're not fighting to get down, you're not fighting to stay up, anything like that. So you want to be neutrally buoyant and you want to be streamlined. So you want to be able to pass through the water as quick as possible with as little as drag as possible, meaning as little effort as possible. The more effort you put in, the more energy you expel, the more food you have to go find. It's hard to find food, right? You don't want to be wasting all this energy, so you want to be nice and streamlined. When it comes to fishes having a very forked tail, remember that tuna tail that I drew you guys? It almost looked like a crescent moon with a very, very tiny caudal peduncle. This is true of any tuna. In fact, I'll go back to a tuna just so you can see right here, okay? This very, very small caudal peduncle right here, that area before the tail starts, and then this very moon-shaped forked tail just like that. That's an indicative of a very fast swimmer. He can beep, 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 and just take off into the water. So when you see a fish like this, you know that they're very, very fast swimmers. Also, these little tiny bumps right here, these are known as finlets, also known as scoots. And again, they can, they reduce drag. So instead of like the water being able to rub all around your skin and stick to the whole thing, as you have these little spikes that stick up, these little finlets that stick up, they kind of kick the water outwards. Right? Shark scales do that too. Remember those placoid scales that we talked about, those little spikes? Right? It kicks the water outwards away from your body so that the water is not dragging all along your body, getting stuck the whole time. It hits one of those things that goes boop and gets shot outwards and therefore reduces drag for you. So tunas, almost every tuna are going to have these little finlets right here. And those are used to, again, to cut the drag and to kind of speed through the water. All right, let's get back to where we were. Okay. Vertical migrators, we talked about these already. These are things like copepods. Some jellies do this. Some fishes do this. I believe lanternfish do this. Dragonfish and viperfish do not. So what they're doing, again, is they're looking for food. So if you are small and you're not a really good swimmer and you don't have any defensive mechanisms, the only thing you can do is kind of hide in the dark in the shadows. So you're going to go down where it's deep, where it's dark during the daytime, and then you're going to wait. And as soon as it starts getting nighttime, right, it's called twilight, you can actually see this, and it's called a deep sea scattering layer, and I believe we talked about it already. But you can actually see this. You can ping this with like a radar, like a sonar, and you can see it's a whole layer of small animals that are all kind of at the same depth for really long distances of time, or long distances. And you're like, what is this layer? And then all of a sudden the entire layer moves up. So the sun starts to go down. This layer vertically goes up into the water column. Now they're going from the mesopelagic to the epipelagic. That's because they're hiding in the mesopelagic where it's dark, and they're going up to the epipelagic where there's food. So they're eating things like the phytoplankton, the smaller organisms and stuff like that live on the phytoplankton, right? So they're feeding at night when nobody can see them and their predators aren't out. And then during the day when it gets bright and sunny, they're like, and they go back down to remain hidden in the dark depths. So this is how they feed sporadically, only during nighttime, but they protect themselves from other predators. So again, you are spending a lot of energy. One, you're only eating at night. You're never eating during the day. So you have to wait to eat. And two, you're spending a lot of energy swimming up. We're talking about from the mesopelagic to the epipelagic. You were talking about hundreds of meters, if not 1,000 meters. That's a long distance for a little tiny, organism to swim. That would be like, 20,000 times your body length is how far you're swimming and then coming all the way back every single day. So it is very energy costly, but if it works out because you don't get eaten, then it's a successful, feeding mechanism. So it's kind of, you have to weigh the costs and benefits. Should you vertically migrate? Should you not vertically migrate? And you don't really get to choose it. It's kind of species specific, whether your species is able to vertically migrate. And we're going to talk about that when we talk about the abyss as well. Oh no, just kidding. We're going to talk about it now. Haha. All right. So we have the euphotic zone. Remember, the true photic zone. This is where the light is. So if you feed on an organism that needs the light, right, you need to go that far up to actually get to them. So in the daytime, right, these organisms are doing photosynthesis. Like these are your little diatoms right here, your copepods, your whatever, your cyanobacteria. These are all doing photosynthesis. And so these organisms are going to be hiding out down here where it's dark in the mesopelagic zone. Okay, and at nighttime, they're actually going to go all the way up and they're going to start feeding here in the euphotic zone. And then at night, again, they're going to go back down. So it's really crucial for them to be able to come up, feed it in the safety of the darkness of night, and then go back down to the depths where they can stay protected. Even though there's no food, they will be okay for a while because all they'll have to do the next night is go back up and feed again. All right. So remember that all food webs begin with producers, right? Primary producers. So first the producers, either your plants, your algae, your photosynthetic bacteria, whatever's on the base of the food chain is going to be your producers. Okay, so in this case, cyanobacteria are very, very important. There's a ton of them out there. Remember those Oscillatoria, Anabaena, all those cyanobacteria are very, very important because they're good at the floating, they're good at the photosynthesis thing. And there's not a ton out there to eat them, so they're actually in high numbers and high abundance. Another one is DOM. Hopefully you guys remember DOM, D-O-M, dissolved organic materials. And that's something that we can see here in this picture, is these particles are probably dissolved organic materials. Okay, so someone got eaten here and parts of his body are now floating down. That's DOM. Someone pooped. I hate to say it, guys, but remember poop and dead bodies. Huge source of nutrients, right? Someone pooped. Those are floating nutrients, okay? So DOM, just dissolved organic materials, just itself are actually really big sources of the base of the food chain. Okay, so in this case, it's not even a producer. It's literally just someone that's been eaten, the little bits that didn't actually get eaten. So think of like a seal like being eaten by a shark, right? That shark's not going to eat absolutely every little bit of the seal. There's going to be little bits of blood and little bits of material and fat and skin and stuff like that. Other organisms will eat that. And that is all considered DOM, dissolved organic material. It's basically this little stuff. No, those are big pieces of DOM. What usually it's, you know, a coccolithophore dies and some of its silica or calcium carbonate shell falls off. Okay, that's DOM. But it does include, you know, poop and dead bodies. Gross, I know. All right, yeah. Upwelling. Remember that upwelling is super important. We love upwelling because it brings all of that DOM that's settled to the bottom. It gets stuck there. Well, nobody but whoever's right on the bottom can use it. So, areas over the continental shelf, no matter what, even in these winter times with these big storms, they're going to cause some kind of upwelling. That upwelling, again, is going to bring those nutrients back up to shore and it's going to circulate them back up. Now they're floating along. Eventually they will start to sink, but hopefully they will get far enough offshore that you can actually reach, you know, the oceanic zone. And therefore, before they actually start to settle back down, some of these other organisms can utilize them. So upwelling, great thing. Brings all those lost nutrients that have settled on the bottom, it brings them back up. Now remember, if we're talking open ocean, you're not going to get a lot of upwelling. Over continental shelf, neritic zones, absolutely, lots of upwelling, good things. But over the open ocean, you're not going to get so much upwelling, especially the farther out you go. So the farther out you go, the less things like nutrients and DOM there are. So keep that in mind when people are always like, oh, all you have to do is go farther out in the ocean. You'll be able to find plenty of things. Not true. Not true. So remember our good friend upwelling, right? We have the deeper, cold, nutrient-rich waters which are coming up. They hit the shore. They have nowhere to go, so they just turn and go back out to sea. Eventually, as they come back out here, eventually they will start settling. But again, depending on the strength of the upwelling, you can actually have them go pretty far outwards. And things like currents and stuff can also pick them up. So a little bit of upwelling here near the surface, or sorry, near the shore, can actually get carried by these surface winds for pretty far distances of time. Pretty far distances over long periods of time, and therefore that DOM, that dissolved organic material, can make its way farther out into the ocean and be used by other organisms out there. So again, we get nice nutrient-rich water coming up here. The surface areas or surface waters are going to push it. Again, because it's warmer surface water, again, we're hitting the shore, which is warmed by the sun. We're hitting the shallow areas, which is warmed by the sun. You're on this top, you know, say 50 meters, 100 meters, that's being warmed by the sun. So now this warmer surface water is actually less dense than the colder water. So this will actually travel above the deep nutrient cold water for a long period of time. And that's what's really beneficial, especially farther out, is when you get these warm waters going farther and farther away from the shore, because they are less dense than the lower waters, the cold lower waters. And therefore will kind of ride on top until eventually they cool and then we'll begin to settle. El Nino years. El Nino years can be good things and bad things. Typically, we as humans love El Nino years because we get lots of rain, right? Rain are good for crops, rain is good for plants, rain is good for, you know, clean out our environment. However, rain's not necessarily good for the ocean. So one, you get a lot of like pollutants and stuff that get dragged from the mainland, especially if you haven't had a good rain in a while. You know, that's why they say drive safe when it's the first rain of the season. Because there's all this oil that's built up on the roads, and so the first rain will usually wash all that away, which is great for not the ocean, because it all gets washed into the ocean. So it can actually be really, and they even say like don't go surfing or scuba diving or anything in the ocean for 72 hours after a storm, because for 72 hours the grossness is still just being washed directly into the ocean. So not great. But El Nino also causes all these other things to happen, not just rain. Causes warmer waters. So again, people usually love it because yes, you can go to the beach, it's nice and warm, it's great. Well, not everybody really loves this warmer water, especially if you're algae. So algae like our macrocystis out here, just terrible in El Nino years. It's too warm. All the algae dies, which means all those like little algae forests that we talk about, those kelp forests, all of those are going to be gone, and which means all the fish are going to be gone. The crabs, the snails, everything else that depends on that are going to be gone because we lost that algae that doesn't like it when it's too warm. Now it also decreases the wind, so it actually decreases upwelling. So we talked about how good upwelling can be. Well, El Nino decreases the upwelling, and that's what we can see right here. So when you decrease the upwelling, you're not bringing those nutrients back to the surface, which means you're not going to have the primary production that you would, because the primary producers need nutrients. Okay, so the stirring up of the bottom stirs up all these nutrients, which are great for the algae, great for the fishes. We now lose all those algae being bloomed. You're not going to have things like the fishes and the copepods, which are doing as well. So that's what you can see right here. In the beginning, we have nice, healthy upwelling. It brings all these nutrients up. We have these winds and these surface waters that blow and mix it and move it all around. So we have this nice mixing of all of this nutrient-rich water, which causes the phytoplankton to bloom, which causes the zooplankton to bloom, which causes the fishes to go crazy. So this is good, very healthy with this upwelling. Very, very good thing. Well, when you have an El Nino event, you have weak upwelling, so you don't have it. So what you have is very, very little nutrient-rich water comes up, not really mixed by these winds because we don't have a lot of these winds, which means that DOM, that dissolved organic material, does not get pushed as far offshore as it would in a non-El Nino year. So anybody who's reliant on those nutrients isn't going to get those nutrients because we don't have this upwelling that we should if we had stronger winds and we had, you know, a non-El Nino year. With that, that's all I have for you guys today. Remember, if you have any questions, you can go ahead and email me, or I will see you during our meetings. Otherwise, hopefully you guys have a wonderful week, and we only have 2 more lectures, guys. 2 more lectures to go. So we have the deep sea and we have human impacts, and then you guys are done with marine biology for the semester. So thank you so much for sticking with me. I hope you guys have a wonderful day, and I will see you guys soon.